Chapter 13. She's So Cold. June 27th, 1998. Raccoon City. Vincent Shapiro turned away from the ungainly thing that sat hunched before him and wandered to the helipad's perimeter. The hazy view in his new direction wasn't much to look at. Unpainted cooling towers, a boxy warehouse, a trio of whitewashed smokestacks that looked like giant cigarettes. Ugly city. It rained too damn much here. Which direction was he facing? East? It was hard to tell with the low cloud cover blocking out the sky. The warehouse doors faced west, so he guessed he was facing north. He turned so that he was roughly facing south-southwest. He was staring at the helipad again, but took no interest in the activity taking place on it. He was, in fact, looking past the horizon, trying with all his might to see something just under 600 miles away. Lucille. She was waiting for him, in Reno. If everything played out right, she wouldn't have to wait much longer. He would make his run, catch a few winks in the staff dormitory, and head out early tomorrow afternoon. He would be with her by supper time. Vincent smiled and tilted his head to the smoky late evening sky. Tomorrow by supper time. No more umbrella bullshit. No more runs, just a fat wallet and Lucille. He popped a stick of gum in his mouth and closed his eyes. He could see her, those vicious curves, the desert sun glistening off her smooth skin. Less than 20 hours and they would be together. He would be inside her, opening her wide and hearing her scream out over the Nevada landscape. Every moment with her was ecstasy, pure ecstasy. She was worth every penny. Vincent opened his eyes, scowled as the lumpers buttoned up his chopper's cargo doors. Even if I have to fly this ugly bitch to afford her. Of course, he didn't have much choice in the matter. Once he had committed to Lucille, he had forfeited the right to be picky about his work. Samson Air Cargo paid him top dollar to fly this pregnant whale of a chopper, and so fly he did, whether he enjoyed it or not. One of the lumpers, Vincent didn't know his name but referred to him as Double Cheese, began ambling over to where he was standing. Mr. Cheese was simultaneously picking at his crotch and shuffling the cargo manifest into an unintelligible mess. He was a lazy, overpaid screw-up, even by the low standards set by his peers. "She's all look," Double Cheese began, holding out the manifest. "Yeah." Vincent plucked the clipboard out of his stubby fingers. For the sake of the cameras on the helipad and the Cro-Magnon standing in front of him, he went through the motions of checking over the cargo list. In reality, he only cared for one number hidden amid the useless paperwork, the load's gross cargo weight. There it is. 8,970 pounds? Those sons of bitches. That's less than 300 of the max takeoff weight. "You'll need to take her gentle tonight. There's some of them glass tubes that..." "Got it." He scrawled a signature on Double C's copy of the documents and walked over to the chopper. Why the hell couldn't they add an extra trip in every couple of months and not bother loading him to the tits? The chopper was a washtub at the best of times. At 300 under gross weight, the thing screamed like it was dying and handled like a fat kid on roller skates. He cursed under his breath, tossed the manifest onto the pilot's seat, and crawled back out to begin his pre-flight inspection. The Eurocopter AS-332 was relatively new and well maintained. However, Vincent was a stickler for routine pre-flights, especially when he was the one doing the flying. "Cal covers off." He had to admit that in reality, he didn't have it all too bad. Sure, he flew heavy loads, but it wasn't a terribly long flight to URC Annex 2134. He didn't have to worry about his fuel levels unless he hit a nasty headwind. No oil leakage from the gearbox, always good. The warehouse and his drop point had cargo workers, so he wasn't lumping his own loads. He never flew passengers. He hated passengers. Tail rotor blades looked straight, rivets intact, bearings smooth. All Samson Air Cargo, one of the Umbrella Corporation's many public faces, asked was that he be available 3 weeks of the month and never discuss what he did for a living or where he flew. Rotor control rods free, cotter pins in place. Umbrella and their fucking pointless secrecy. As far as he could tell, URC Annex 2134 was just some cruddy old mansion, built for no reason other than that Umbrella could afford it. It was likely another of old man Spencer's white elephants, that senile nut job. Is that a cigarette butt? It is, for shit's sake. Those morons know that the helipad is FOD free. Like I want to lose the turbine because some lumber had a nick fit. I'd better let Double Cheese know about this. Who was he kidding? He knew Umbrella was up to something less than leisurely in that mansion. He had seen some of the stuff that had been delivered there. Weird sci-fi junk that looked like it belonged in Dr. Frankenstein's lab. Pitot tube cover-off. Not that he gave the slightest shit what they did. Umbrella paid him the princely sum of just under $200,000 a year to fly cargo. Master battery on. Enough money to afford Lucille's $700,000 loan. Yeah, Umbrella's stupid little secrets were worth it. Master avionics on. His fingers slid past a small photograph that was duct taped in place just above the altimeter. It caught his eye. He smiled slightly. Fuel boost off. It was his favorite photo of her, taken the day before last year's Reno air races. She was sitting by herself on the tarmac, sleek and sexy, with her polished fuselage and Navajo red wingtips. Throttle roll to idle detent. Lucille. She didn't care if he was gaining weight and going grey. She gave and never asked for anything he couldn't provide. Routine maintenance, hangar fees, all peanuts compared to the thrills she granted. Engine starter button in, engines lit up, fuel cutoff depressed, RPMs up to 1300. He finished his running checks, requested airspace clearance from Arclay Regional Airport, and heaved the Eurocopter into the air. The chopper groaned and creaked as gravity resisted its upward trajectory. Up it climbed, through a layer of smog that smelled like a tire fire, put out with an old mattress, through the hazy cloud cover, finally breaking into the starry night sky. He cut the collective pitch and pushed the cyclic stick forward, transitioning to vertical flight. Vincent had been making the URC Annex run for 2 years. He had the flight path committed to memory. As per orders, he would head south until he was 50 miles out of Arclay Regional's radar cone, before switching northeast to the mansion, more umbrella smoke and mirrors. In what felt like the blink of an eye, he was nearing the mansion and dropping altitude. Umbrella paid far too well for him to ever consider breaking his terms of employment. However, he had learned a few things about URC Annex 2134, namely that the mansion was completely isolated. Everything the mansion needed was choppered in. The place didn't have any telephones either. Apparently the supervisor had a satellite phone locked in his office, and the cargo workers used a short-range radio to hail in air traffic. But other than that, all communication was sent by paper. He wouldn't be surprised if the correspondences had some sort of self-destruct system built in. Once the nav aid indicated that he was within 2 nautical miles of his destination, he switched the radio over to the mansion's frequency. 2134, this is Samson. ETA 5 minutes, over. A minute passed, and he frowned. He hadn't received the reply to his transmission. 2134, this is Samson, over. Bunch of screw-ups. They knew his schedule. Where were they? He nosed the copter through the cloud cover, into the drizzle and muck. The mansion was a half-mile in front of him, barely discernible among the trees. He cursed under his breath. There was still no reply from the loading crew. This had happened to him twice before. Someone on the ground was going to get their ass chewed out. 2134, this is Samson. Come in, over. His repeated radio transmissions yielded no response. He spent the next 10 minutes circling the compound before finally losing patience and dropping to treetop level. Did it seem darker than usual down there? No, it was just the thick cloud cover. He swung the copter over the mansion and switched on his landing lights, washing the courtyard below in high-intensity artificial daylight. Some poor sap standing near the fountain jerked his arms up, shielding himself from the sudden transition of day to night. Good morning, sweetheart. One last try before he landed uninvited. URC Annex 2134, this is Samson Air Cargo. Do you copy? Over. No reply. The lumpers did not copy. He briefly circled over the unlighted helipad, convinced someone would clue into the gigantic flying thing hovering above their empty heads, but no avail. He cut the rotor collective pitch and eased the heavy copter down, digging deep into his mind for clever things to cool the lackadaisical cargo workers. Safely on terra firma, Vincent cut the throttle to idle. Any minute, the lumpers would spill out into the walled helipad, arms flapping, mouthing excuses, morons, each and every one of them. Any minute now. Several any minute nows passed, and he was still alone, quietly seething in the pilot's seat. The only movement on the cargo platform were the rotor blades' elongated shadows dancing on the cinder block walls. This is just ridiculous. He killed his engines and shrugged himself out of the cockpit. Loose grit crunched under his shoes, and he scowled again. The helipad was supposed to be swept clean. What the hell were the lumpers up to? He started for the cargo dock's northwest corner, toward the long corridor that led to the freight elevator and shipping office. Why were the lights out? Hey, dipshits! Quit playing hide and seek and unload me already! He poked his head into the darkened shipping office, reached in, and switched on the lights. The cluttered room flickered sickly fluorescent, and the ceiling fan buzzed, but not a thing moved. It seemed as though the lumpers had closed up shop. What? Are you guys on freaking vacation? There was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Someone should have shown up by now. This was wrong. Should he just leave? He tried to imagine what his night would be like if he flew back to Raccoon City without unloading. Knowing Umbrella, he would likely spend the weekend at the facility, filling out one incident report after another. Piss on that. He had somewhere else to be. He'd find someone here soon enough. Vincent turned away from the office and started down the murky, dark corridor. He wrinkled his nose. The hallway had the distinctive reek of fertilizer, mixed with rotten fruit. Was this something new? He was now standing at the doors to the freight elevator, staring intently at the illuminated down button that he had just pressed. It was the only source of light in the hallway. He'd take a quick peek downstairs. If he chanced upon somebody, he would be sure to ask a number of pointed questions and demand to be unloaded. If he didn't run into anyone, he would beat it back to the chopper double time. Umbrella paid him well, but he wasn't about to stick his neck out too far. Typical. This stuff always happens on my last run. Dejected, he looked away and fumbled for a fresh stick of gum. It was then that his eyes fell on the white face, staring up at him not 4 feet away. He leapt back, with his breath caught in his throat. His flight boots snagged on some loose electrical cables, and he tumbled to the ground, thrashing like a winged bird. Holy shit! He scrambled away on his elbows. Vincent always had excellent eyesight. Even in the dim lighting, he could see that the man was too pale to be alive. He could see the shiny pistol in one hand, the dark triangular spray of gore behind his head. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit! His mouth seemed to be on autopilot, automatically mouthing a chorus of expletives. Mustering what little nerve he had, he inched ever closer to the man who, judging by the grey uniform, had been one of the mansion's security personnel. It didn't take Detective Columbo to deduce that the guard turned his weapon on himself. The corpse's mouth was a caved-in black mess, and the muzzle of his Glock was syrupy with congealed blood. He grabbed the dead man by his epaulets. The guy must have been dead for a while, long past the effects of rigor mortis. Vincent released him a moment later. The guard slid boneless down the wall, with foul-smelling jelly oozing out of his destroyed mouth. Oh shit. This is bad. Oh shit. As good as his eyes may have been, his ears, safely padded in his flight helmet and damaged by years of roaring aircraft engines, were less than stellar. He didn't hear the elevator's grated doors clang open, and certainly didn't hear the erratic footsteps approaching. It was only when he noticed the shadow fall on him that he turned away from the dead guard. His jaw dropped. He tried to scream, but found that his breath had been stolen away. All he could manage was a small squeak. The thing that stood over him was a man, or at least it had been a man. It was dressed in lumper's coveralls. Vincent could read the ID tag pinned to one breast pocket. R. Fazio, URC Logistics. He could see the ragged hole where R. Fazio's nose should have been. He saw the blackened stump of a missing left arm. He could see the empty pits that had once housed R. Fazio's eyeballs. He saw all these things, but his mind had yet to sum them up and tally them as a whole. The man standing in front of him looked dead, but the dead didn't walk. Therefore, R. Fazio was not dead. Fazio groaned thickly and threw himself at him. Vincent remembered how to scream. He shrieked and beat at the thing. His bladder released in a warm gush. The Fazio thing grabbed at him with its good hand and bared its teeth. Fortunately, he had enough presence of mind and fast enough reflexes to drop his head. Fazio's teeth thucked as they collided with Vincent's flight helmet. Get it off! Get it off! He grabbed at the thing's arm. His hands slipped and sunk deeper than they should have, as waxy flesh slipped off the bone. Fazio attempted another bite, but at the last possible moment he jerked his head up, cracking the helmet into Fazio's lower jaw. A thick mess of blood and teeth waterfalled down Vincent's face. He screamed louder and shoved at the lumper with all his strength. The living dead man grunted and pitched back, and so Vincent used the moment to scramble away, only managing to snare himself into a tangle of conduit wires and the security guard's body. Get away! Fazio was on him a moment later, fumbling at Vincent's flight suit with its skeletal hand. Its stump rested heavily on the wet spot directly over his crotch. The crushing agony stole away his breath. In his frantic struggle, Vincent's right hand bunted away a cold metal object. It slid along the pavement, came to a rest near his head. He stared into its dark, gore-encrusted muzzle for a split second, and then his left foot sent a bolt of pain up to the tip of his head. He hollered and jerked his head up. Behind Fazio, he could see a second dead man, with the tip of his flight boot clamped between its teeth. No! Without registering what he was holding or what he was doing, he had the security guard's pistol in his hands. He squeezed the trigger twice, blinding himself with the long flash that leapt out of the dirty barrel. Fazio's face exploded in a dark smear and sprayed Vincent with gore. The animated corpse pitched over. With Fazio dead, Vincent had a clear shot at his other assailant. He fired a single round into the other man's chest, and the creature teetered back. The gun clicked empty. Whimpering and shaking uncontrollably, he scrambled to his feet and tore down the hallway at a full sprint. He could see the copter ahead, his ticket out of this madhouse. It was such a beautiful thing. He flew through the helicopter entrance, pausing only to latch the door behind him and to spew vomit down the front of his flight suit. He crawled into the pilot's seat, immediately set to getting the chopper airborne. Come on, come on! A dark shape stumbled out of the gloom. It was headed toward him, swaying like a seasick sailor. Come on! Lucille got knocked to the floor as he hit the fuel boost. The shape gained detail. It became a man with a white face and the dark smudge of blood on its coveralls. Come on! The dead lumper was directly in front of him. He could see the gaping hole where he had shot him. He hit the starter buttons. The turbines began to spool up. The corpse pressed its pallid face against the chopper's windscreen. It was gnashing its teeth like a trash compactor. Long ropes of bloody drool swung from its chin. Come on, you big ugly bitch! The lumper wailed in protest and beat at the perspex, smearing brown gunk on the glass. The engines caught, and Vincent jammed the throttle wide. The main rotor spun past 100%. The copter began to dance and buck. A cacophony of breaking glass and crunching metal jangled from the cargo bay as his load was jostled about. Get in the air, you heavy fucker! The dead lumper was blown away from the rotor's blast of air. Vincent pulled back on the flight controls, and the Eurocopter jerked upward. It yawned sideways and nearly clipped the dock's retaining wall before he regained control. The chopper settled. He let out a wavering breath and climbed to a safe altitude. He didn't bother sparing the mansion another glance. The trip back seemed to take less than a minute, partly because he didn't bother with taking a circular route back, but also because he was flying as fast as the chopper would go. The seat of his pants had cooled to an uncomfortable puddle of shame, but at least his hands were steadier. Only now that he had partially regained his senses did he realize how badly he smelled. He needed to take shallow breaths from his mouth to keep from retching. Very little of the stench could be blamed on him. He smelled of decay. Those lumpers were dead. He didn't know how, but they were dead. The chopper shook as Vincent's entire body shuddered. Don't even think about it. Just get back to base and get out of here. The cockpit radio came to life. He started at the sound, and the chopper lost 100 feet of altitude. Something in the cargo area shattered and skittered along the floor. Unknown aircraft, this is Arclay Regional Tower. Identify yourself. He had just crossed the Arclay River and was flying over Raccoon City's Cider District. He didn't bother responding to Arclay Regional's query. He would be long gone, finished with Umbrella by the time a reprimand came his way. He was quickly drawing nearer the cigarette smokestacks. Unknown aircraft, you have entered Class C airspace. Identify yourself. Screw you, he mumbled. His hands trembled in their filthy flying gloves. I quit.